I am Yosef Baruch, a 45-year-old rabbi, born and raised in the vibrant city of New York. My life seemed picture perfect from the outside. I had everything one could wish for: a beautiful family, a respected position in my community, and a sense of purpose that most people spent their lives searching for. My wife, Miriam, was the heart of our home, and our two children, Ezra and Rachel, were the light of my life. We lived in a cozy but spacious home on the Upper West Side, filled with the sounds of laughter and the smells of Shabbat dinners. People knew me as a man of faith, a guide, a teacher, a man who could offer solace and wisdom in the darkest times. On the surface, I was confident in my beliefs. I lived my life with purpose, following the teachings of the Torah and devoting myself to my community. But there was always something beneath the surface that I couldn't shake. I had questions that I dared not ask aloud. I never truly felt at peace with my spiritual journey. Though I was well respected, I couldn't silence the quiet doubts that whispered to me in the middle of the night. Was my life truly in alignment with the deeper truth I longed for? Did the rituals, the prayers, and the teachings fill me with the peace I so desperately sought? These doubts were buried deep within me, hidden behind the steady rhythm of my daily life, my work at the synagogue, and my familial responsibilities. It wasn't until one fateful night that everything I knew about myself and my faith was challenged in a way that I could never have anticipated. It all began with a phone call, a call that would forever change the course of my life. It was a cold winter evening, the kind where the streets of the city are coated in a sheen of ice and the air feels thick with the weight of an impending storm. I had just finished teaching a group of students about the ancient scriptures, feeling good about the knowledge I had shared. My children were in bed, and Miriam and I were enjoying a quiet moment at the dinner table when my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but I answered, hoping it was nothing serious. On the other end was a voice that sent a chill down my spine. It was the hospital. Miriam's cousin, who had been staying with us for the weekend, had been involved in a car accident. The doctors were unsure if she would survive. Without a second thought, I rushed out the door, driving through the empty streets of the city, my mind racing with fear and confusion. The night was a blur. I remember the sound of my tires screeching against the wet road, the frantic calls to Miriam, the frantic rush to the hospital. But everything became a haze when I arrived at the ER. The machines were beeping, nurses running around, the smell of antiseptic overwhelming my senses, and then I saw her body lying still, pale as the snow outside. Her chest rose and fell weakly, and I realized, with a shock that seemed to pierce my soul, that she might not make it. The world around me seemed to grow distant, as though I was watching everything unfold from far away. My body felt heavy, and the sounds around me became muffled. It was as though I was caught between two worlds, unable to escape from the paralyzing fear that gripped me. The minutes dragged on endlessly, and I could feel my heart racing, my breath shallow, as if the weight of the moment was crushing me. I didn't know if it was the fear of losing her, the overwhelming helplessness, or the nagging feeling that I was losing control of something far greater than I had ever imagined. It was then that it happened. In that moment of despair, I felt an overwhelming surge of pain, as if something was pulling me apart. The room spun wildly, and I could hear the sound of my heartbeat, pounding louder and louder in my ears. The walls closed in around me, and I was struck by an intense wave of dizziness. My vision blurred, and I felt myself falling, my body unable to keep up with the world that was slipping away. Everything around me seemed to stretch, twist, and distort as my body collapsed onto the cold hospital floor. I could feel my breath escaping me, but it wasn't in my control anymore. I was outside myself, hovering somewhere between the physical world and something else, something far beyond my understanding. I felt as though my very soul was being torn from my body, like I was being pulled into a vast, dark chasm that beckoned with an insistent force. In those fleeting moments, I felt as though I was standing on the edge of eternity, looking into the abyss with nothing but emptiness surrounding me. There were no words, no explanations, only a suffocating void. And then everything went black. But even in that abyss, I felt an undeniable presence, a presence that was neither hostile nor distant, but somehow comforting. It was a warmth, a light in the deepest dark. and that light called to me, beckoned me, as if inviting me to follow. I don't know how long I was gone, but the next thing I remember was waking up, my body heavy and aching, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I was back in the hospital room, but it was different now. The air felt thick, and the sounds around me seemed muffled, as if I was still floating outside myself. But what I saw next would change everything. There, standing at the foot of my bed, was a man unlike any I had ever seen before. He was tall, with a presence so profound that it seemed to fill the room with an aura of peace. His eyes, those eyes, shone with a gentle light, and though I couldn't quite make sense of him, I felt as though I knew him. I didn't know why, but I recognized him immediately. It was Jesus. The moment I saw him, my heart skipped a beat. I blinked, unsure if I was hallucinating, if this was some fevered dream brought on by the trauma. But there he was, standing in front of me, Jesus radiating an aura of peace so tangible that I felt like I could reach out and touch it. His presence was overwhelming, yet not in the way a storm overwhelms. It was calming, as if a weight I had carried for years had been lifted from my shoulders. I tried to speak, but no words came out. Instead, all I could do was stare, feeling like a child caught in the presence of something far greater than my understanding. He was dressed simply in a robe of light, his face full of compassion. There was no judgment in his gaze, only a deep, knowing understanding, as though he saw right through me, to the very core of who I was. It was as if he knew everything, the deepest parts of me that I had hidden away, the secrets I had buried under layers of pride, duty, and faith. He did not speak immediately. Instead, he looked at me with those eyes, and in that gaze, I felt a flood of emotions rise within me: fear, awe, confusion, and something else, something I couldn't put into words. A deep yearning, a longing for something more, a longing for truth. And then he spoke. "Yosef," he said, his voice calm and steady, yet filled with such authority that it felt like the earth itself trembled under the weight of it. "You have lived a life of certainty, of rules, of rituals, but deep inside, there is a void, a place where doubt lurks, a place where you fear the truth because it would require you to change." His words struck me like a dagger to the heart. How could he know this? How could he see the doubts I had concealed for so long? My whole life had been about maintaining control, about following the path before me. I had never questioned my faith outwardly, but in the deepest corners of my heart, I knew something was missing. Something had always been missing. "Do you know why you are here?" Jesus continued, his eyes never leaving mine. "You are not here by accident, Yosef. This is not a coincidence. You have been given a chance to see the truth." His words felt like a lifeline, yet at the same time, they filled me with dread. What did he mean by the truth? Was it the truth of my faith, or something deeper, something more intimate and personal? I felt both drawn to him and afraid of what he might reveal. I had spent my life avoiding certain truths about myself, about my choices, about my very beliefs. But now, standing before this man, this figure of divine grace and compassion, I felt exposed, vulnerable, like there was nowhere left to hide. Without another word, he raised his hand, and the room around us began to change. The walls of the hospital room faded away, replaced by an expanse of darkness, an endless void. There was no light here, only the suffocating weight of nothingness. I felt myself being pulled forward, like a leaf in a strong current, with my body weightless as I was carried through the darkness. It felt like time had stretched, and yet it was as if I had been here for an eternity. The moment when I had fallen into that state of near death now seemed like a distant memory, a prelude to something much larger, much more profound. I tried to speak, to ask where we were going, but my voice was lost in the silence. Then, suddenly, a distant flicker of light appeared before me. It was faint at first, but it grew brighter until it blazed like a sun in the distance. And as we moved closer to it, I realized that it was not just light, it was fire. A fire that consumed everything in its path. A blaze so hot that I could feel its heat from where I stood, even though I was not physically there. The fire was not the comforting kind, the kind that warms you on a cold night. This fire was dark, hungry, and unforgiving. As I approached, I could hear the crackling of the flames, the screams of agony that seemed to echo from deep within the fire. I gasped in horror. My heart pounded in my chest as I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. "This," Jesus said softly, his voice almost lost in the roar of the flames, "is where your choices lead, Yosef. This is where every sin, every action taken without love, without compassion, leads. This is the consequence of a life lived without true understanding." I could barely breathe, the terror in my chest growing with every second. The flames seemed to reach out, their tongues licking the air as if trying to pull me in. But I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, forced to witness the suffering within this hellish place. I saw faces, hundreds of them, twisting in agony, their eyes wide with fear and regret. Some were familiar, others were strangers. But all of them shared one thing in common. They were all trapped in the fire, consumed by their own choices. I looked at Jesus, my voice trembling. Is this where I am headed? Is this my fate?" He looked at me with sadness in his eyes, yet there was no condemnation, only deep sorrow. "Not if you choose to change, Yosef. Not if you choose to turn away from the path of pride, from the path of certainty, from the path that has brought you here." The words hit me like a physical blow. For the first time in my life, I realized that I had lived with an arrogance I had never acknowledged before. I had built walls around my heart, convincing myself that my faith and my knowledge were enough to save me. But now, in the face of this unrelenting fire, I saw the truth. It wasn't enough. I had failed to live with the love and compassion that Jesus taught. I felt tears streaming down my face, but I could not look away from the fire. The faces within it seemed to be calling to me, their eyes filled with an unbearable sadness. "This is not your destiny," Jesus said, his voice steady but filled with compassion. "But it is a warning. The path you walk will lead to this if you do not change." In that moment, I understood. I had been blind. My life had been filled with pride, with a deep sense of self-righteousness that blinded me to the truth. I had focused so much on being right, on adhering to the rules, that I had forgotten the very essence of those rules: love, mercy, and forgiveness. As the fire began to fade, I felt something inside me shift. The weight that had been pressing down on my chest began to lift, and for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. "Do you understand now, Yosef?" Jesus asked, his voice soft but firm. I nodded, though the weight of the truth still hung heavily on my heart. I was shaken to my core, but I knew one thing. I could no longer live the way I had been living. The fire receded, the vision fading into nothingness, but the sense of weightlessness remained. I found myself standing in a vast, darkened space, the edges of my vision blurred, yet a soft light surrounded me. It was as though I was suspended between realms, caught in a moment of transition. And then, there he was again, Jesus, standing before me. This time, he didn't speak right away. He merely looked at me with that same deep, understanding gaze. It was a gaze that made me feel both seen and unknown, as though he could see all the layers of my soul, the ones I had worked so hard to keep hidden, even from myself. "Yosef," he began, his voice a balm to my restless heart, "you saw what your choices can lead to, but there is more I must show you. You will need to confront the full scope of your actions, the impact they have had on others. Only then will you understand the weight of what I ask of you." I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. What more could I possibly see? I had already witnessed hell itself, the anguish, the fire, the endless suffering. What could be worse than that? And then, as though he had read my thoughts, the world around us began to shift again. The soft light that had surrounded me now seemed to pull back, and in its place I felt a powerful surge of energy, like the rush of a great wind. I was no longer standing, but instead I was hurtling through space, through time, and into moments I could not understand. Everything seemed to move in slow motion, yet at the same time it was all happening in an instant. And then I saw it, the faces. They appeared one by one in front of me. Each face was familiar, but not in the way I expected. They weren't just strangers or random people from my past. They were individuals I had known, and they were connected to me in ways I hadn't realized. There was my father, silent, stoic, always proud, yet distant. I had spent my life seeking his approval, trying to live up to an image of what a son should be, but I had never really known him. We had never truly connected. Then there was my mother, so full of love, yet so fragile. I had taken her for granted, never once questioning the sacrifices she made for our family. I had always been too focused on my own life, my own ambitions, to truly appreciate her. And then there were the faces of those I had hurt, the people I had disregarded, the relationships I had broken. Each one of them was now standing before me, staring at me with eyes that I had avoided for years. "Do you see them, Yosef?" Jesus asked, his voice now echoing in the space around me. "These are the ones you have affected. These are the people who have felt the weight of your choices. You have caused them pain, neglect, and sorrow, and now you must face the consequences of that." I tried to speak, but my throat closed up. The guilt was suffocating, an invisible weight pressing down on my chest. I wanted to deny it, to argue, but I knew deep down that Jesus was right. These were my choices, my actions, my inaction. I saw myself through their eyes now. The man who had been too focused on his career, too busy with his beliefs, to truly see the people around him. The husband who had failed to love his wife the way she deserved. The father who had been too distant from his children. I had lived my life thinking that I was doing the right thing, that my beliefs would save me, but I had failed to see the very people I claimed to love. "I never intended to hurt them," I whispered, the words coming out barely above a breath. "I didn't mean to." Jesus stepped closer, his gaze not condemning, but filled with a deep compassion. "You never intended, Yosef, but your actions have consequences. The truth is that your intentions don't always match your impact. You must learn to live in the light of this truth, to understand the weight of your actions and to seek true reconciliation." I trembled as I absorbed his words. I had built my entire life on the idea that my intentions were enough. I had always believed that as long as I followed the rules, as long as I maintained my faith, everything would be fine. But Jesus was showing me the truth, that my actions, no matter how well-intentioned, had consequences, and those consequences rippled through the lives of others. The faces around me began to shift, and the vision changed once more. I saw the faces of strangers now, those I had interacted with briefly, perhaps even unknowingly. But they, too, were affected by my actions. A harsh word spoken in passing, an unkind gesture overlooked, small moments seemingly insignificant that had left marks on others. "Do you see how deeply your life is woven into the lives of others?" Jesus asked gently. "How your every choice creates ripples in the world? It is not enough to live for yourself, to focus only on your own path. You must recognize that you are part of a greater tapestry, and your actions affect the whole." I felt my heart shatter. My pride, my self-righteousness, my belief that I was somehow above it all came crashing down. I had lived as though I were isolated, as though my life was mine alone, that my actions were only mine to bear. But now I saw the interconnectedness of everything. I was not an island. I was part of a vast, intricate web of human experience. And that web, as I was beginning to understand, was held together by love. I looked at Jesus, my heart aching. "What do I do now?" I asked, the words breaking out of me in a desperate plea. "How can I fix this? How can I undo the pain I've caused?" Jesus' gaze softened. "You cannot undo the past, Yosef, but you can choose to live differently from this moment forward. You can begin again, not by erasing your mistakes, but by confronting them, by accepting responsibility, and by choosing love. True love. A love that forgives, a love that heals." I stood there overwhelmed by the enormity of his words. Love. It was so simple, yet so profound. I had spent my life clinging to rules, to righteousness, to my own understanding of the world. But now, Jesus was showing me that the foundation of everything, the very heart of my faith, was love. "I am not asking for perfection, Yosef," Jesus continued. "I am asking for a willing heart, one that desires to change, one that seeks truth, seeks love, and seeks reconciliation. This is the path I have set before you." As he spoke, I felt a shift deep inside me. It was as though my entire being was being reoriented, my perspective changing. I could feel the seeds of something new being planted within me, a desire to live differently, to love more deeply, to seek truth, and to reconcile with those I had hurt. But I also felt something else, fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of the change that would come, fear of confronting the enormity of the damage I had caused. And yet, in the midst of that fear, there was also a profound sense of peace. A peace that told me that even in my brokenness, I was not beyond redemption. That even though I had fallen short, there was still hope. "Your journey has only just begun, Yosef," Jesus said, his voice filled with a quiet strength. "But remember, I am with you. Always." As Jesus finished his words, I felt the ground beneath me shift once more, but this time it wasn't a fall. It was as if I was being gently lifted, elevated beyond the dark expanse that had surrounded me, into a place of light. The intense sensation of floating gave way to an overwhelming clarity. The noise of my own thoughts, my doubts, my guilt, my self-justifications faded into the background. All that remained was the profound sense of his presence. Jesus did not speak right away. He simply led me, walking beside me. And as he did, I began to see more visions unfold before my eyes. Visions that were so vivid and symbolic that they felt as though they were etched directly into my soul. The first vision was a scene of a beautiful garden, lush, vibrant, full of color and life. It reminded me of my childhood, of days spent in nature, running through the fields with my siblings. But in this garden, there was something different. In the center stood a great tree, its roots deeply embedded in the earth, its branches stretching high into the sky. The tree was magnificent, yet it bore scars. Its bark was marred, cracked, and jagged, as though it had suffered great pain. Jesus' voice cut through the silence. This is the garden of your soul, Yosef. Your life, like the tree, has been marked by suffering, by choices that have left scars. But just as the tree stands tall despite its wounds, so too can you. Your pain, your mistakes, they do not define you. What you choose to do from here, how you tend to your soul, will shape what you become. I looked at the tree, feeling an inexplicable sadness. It was beautiful in its own way, despite the marks it bore. Was this the story of my life? A life marked by missteps, regret, and sorrow? Or was there more to it? I didn't know, but I knew in that moment that I had to tend to this garden, my soul, if I was to heal. The vision shifted again, and the garden was replaced with an image of a city, a place that felt familiar yet distant. It was a city from my past, from the days of my youth. I saw myself walking down a busy street, surrounded by people I once knew. But as I looked closer, I saw something unsettling. The faces of the people were distant, their expressions cold and indifferent. They passed by, unaware of me, their lives continuing as though I didn't matter. And then in the distance, I saw someone I recognized. It was my father, though not as he was now, but as he had been when I was a child. He was standing on a street corner, waiting for something, or someone. I moved toward him, drawn by a longing I couldn't explain. As I approached, the air around me grew thick with emotion. When I reached him, I opened my mouth to speak, but he didn't turn. His back was to me, and his eyes remained fixed ahead, as though I didn't exist. Suddenly, a wave of despair washed over me. Was this how I had lived my life? So focused on my own ambitions, my own desires, that I had failed to truly connect with those who mattered most to me? I had spent years seeking my father's approval, trying to live up to his expectations, but in doing so, I had overlooked his own needs, his own struggles. I had neglected the very person I sought to please. Jesus' voice broke through my thoughts once again. Do you see, Yosef? You have sought approval from others, but at the cost of true connection. Your father's heart was waiting for you, but you were not present. The world is full of distractions, and in them, we lose the ones who matter most. It is not enough to seek success and recognition. You must seek love, reconciliation, and presence. I felt a pang of sorrow, deeper than anything I had ever experienced. The regrets were heavy, and yet there was something in Jesus' words that stirred a desire for change. I had lived for so long in a world of noise, chasing after things that didn't matter. Now I saw how hollow that pursuit had been. The vision shifted again, and I found myself standing on a street corner, but this time it was a different place entirely. This place was barren, cold, gray, and lifeless. The wind howled through empty streets, and there was no sign of life anywhere. I was standing alone. Jesus appeared beside me, his presence radiating warmth. This is the place where your choices have led you, Yosef. The emptiness, the isolation, the loneliness. It is the result of neglecting the ones you love, of focusing only on yourself. This place is the consequence of a heart hardened by pride, by arrogance, by fear. I looked around, and for the first time, I truly saw the consequences of my actions. The relationships I had broken, the love I had neglected, the trust I had shattered. It was a cold, empty place, and I could feel the weight of every decision that had led me here. But then Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder, his voice gentle. But this does not have to be your end, Yosef. This is not where your story must stop. Even here in the emptiness, there's a chance to rebuild. The road ahead will be long, and the work will be hard. But if you choose love, if you choose truth, if you choose reconciliation, you can fill this emptiness with something beautiful. And in that moment, I felt it. A flicker of hope, small but powerful. I had spent so much of my life looking for external validation, for success, for recognition. But now I saw that the only true path to peace, to healing, was through love and connection, the very things I had neglected for so long. Jesus' presence grew even stronger, and the barren city around us began to shift. The emptiness started to fill with light, and slowly the streets began to fill with life again. People walked past, smiling, talking, reconnecting, and I realized that the work I had to do was not just about me. It was about the people I had neglected, the ones I had hurt. It was about healing the broken relationships, rekindling the love that had been extinguished, and creating something new where there had once been emptiness. Jesus turned to me, his eyes filled with understanding. "You are not beyond redemption, Yosef. This is the road I have set before you. Will you walk it?" The question hung in the air, and I knew the answer already. The road ahead would not be easy, and the weight of my past would not disappear overnight. But I had seen the consequences of my actions, and I had felt the love and compassion of Jesus. I was ready. As the vision faded, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. There was work to be done, yes, but I was no longer alone in this journey. When the visions faded and the light surrounding me slowly dimmed, I found myself back in that same desolate space, the place where my soul had once been torn between regret and denial. The weight of the revelations I had just witnessed pressed down on me, yet the discomfort was not entirely new. It was a weight I had carried for years, buried deep within the recesses of my heart. But now I was faced with it directly, raw and unforgiving. The feelings that had once been buried under a veil of distractions and pride were now impossible to ignore. Jesus stood beside me, his gaze gentle but firm, as if he knew exactly what was happening within me. "I have shown you the consequences of your choices, Yosef," he said quietly. "But now it is up to you to decide how to move forward. You can walk the path of change, of reconciliation, or you can continue down the road that leads to emptiness." The words felt like a cold rush of water, sharp and clear. I could no longer deny the truth. But even as the truth laid itself bare before me, there was something inside that resisted. It was not just fear of failure or the weight of guilt. It was the deep-seated pride that had defined so much of my life. For years, I had believed that I could control everything: my success, my image, my narrative. Admitting that I had made mistakes, acknowledging the depth of my sins, and facing the possibility of true change was not easy. The very idea of it felt like a surrender I wasn't ready to make. "What if I'm too far gone?" I asked, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "What if my past is too broken to heal? What if redemption isn't meant for someone like me?" Jesus' eyes softened. He stepped closer, his voice gentle yet filled with power. "Yosef, no one is beyond redemption. No one. Your past does not define you. It is what you choose to do with it now that matters. Change is not easy. It will not be instant. But if you choose love, if you choose truth, you will begin to heal." I wanted to believe him. I did. But the doubt remained. What if I wasn't strong enough? What if the scars of my past were too deep, too permanent? The guilt and shame I had carried for so long had become a part of my identity, and letting go of that felt like letting go of myself. I thought of my family, my wife, my children, the people I had spent my life neglecting in my pursuit of success. How could I fix the relationships I had damaged when I wasn't even sure how to fix myself? The weight of responsibility bore down on me. The fear of facing the people I had hurt, of having to confront the damage I had done, made me feel small and helpless. Could I really change? Could I really become the man Jesus saw in me? "You are not alone in this," Jesus said, sensing my turmoil. "You never have been." The words lingered in the air, and in that moment, something shifted. A faint stirring of hope began to rise within me, but it was quickly drowned by a flood of fear. What if the change was too difficult? What if the pain of confronting my past was more than I could bear? I closed my eyes, and for a brief moment, the world seemed to fall away. It was just me and the weight of my own choices, the stark reality of the man I had been. I saw again the faces of the people I had hurt, The broken friendships, the missed opportunities, the family I had neglected in my pursuit of ambition. They were all there, etched into my memory. The regret was suffocating, and for a moment I wanted to escape it. I wanted to flee from the truth, to find a way to go back to the way things had been before, when I didn't have to face this darkness. But as I stood there, enveloped in the silence of my own thoughts, I began to understand something. The journey ahead would not be about erasing my past. I could not undo the things I had done, nor could I change the mistakes I had made. But what I could do, what I had the power to do, was change the way I responded to it. I could choose to confront the pain, to face the consequences of my actions, and to make amends where I had failed. It was not an easy choice. It was not a clear path, and the road ahead seemed uncertain, filled with obstacles and fears. But I could not deny the pull of something greater, the call to love, to heal, to reconcile. The next words from Jesus felt like a balm to my soul. Remember, Yosef, I did not come to condemn the world, but to save it. You are not condemned. You are loved. Even in your brokenness, you are worthy of grace. Those words washed over me like a cleansing wave. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to truly feel something other than guilt. It was a small flicker of peace, a spark of understanding that perhaps, just perhaps, I could become the man I had always longed to be. The internal struggle raged within me. I wanted to run from the pain. I wanted to hide from the truth. But I also knew that if I did, I would be forever trapped in the prison of my own pride and self-deception. With great effort, I took a step forward. It wasn't much, but it was a step. And in that moment, I felt something shift. It was as though the weight of my past no longer had the same hold on me. There was still work to do, still so much healing to be had, but I was beginning to understand that change was possible. Even for me, the world around me seemed to breathe with a quiet energy as I stood in the presence of Jesus, his unwavering gaze still locked onto mine. The stillness of the moment felt sacred, yet heavy. The weight of my past was still with me, an ever-present reminder of the choices I had made. But now, something had shifted within me, an inner stirring, a desire to walk a different path, even if it meant facing my deepest fears. The sense of hopelessness that had once consumed me was slowly being replaced by something more profound, the possibility of redemption. I had always believed in the power of change. It was something I preached to others, a message I had espoused in my sermons, my teachings, my prayers. But deep down, I wondered if it was truly possible for someone like me. Could I really change? Could I truly embrace the person Jesus saw within me, the man he believed I could become? It was one thing to hear the words of redemption, but another to believe them when faced with the depth of my own failures. As if sensing my internal struggle, Jesus spoke again, his voice steady and full of compassion. You must embrace the change, Yosef. Change does not come without struggle, but it is through the struggle that you will find freedom. You have spent so many years building walls around your heart, trying to protect yourself from the pain of your past, but those walls only keep you imprisoned. To heal, you must break them down. His words resonated deeply within me. I had spent my life avoiding the truth, masking my pain with achievements and success, pretending that everything was fine when it was far from it. I had built walls around my heart to keep the hurt out, but those walls also kept out the love and the healing I so desperately needed. Jesus had shown me the consequences of my choices, but now he was inviting me into something more, into the freedom of facing my past, acknowledging my mistakes, and allowing myself to heal. It was not going to be easy. I knew that. The guilt, the shame, the self-doubt, they would not vanish overnight. But for the first time in my life, I felt a glimmer of hope that change was possible. I looked at Jesus, his face filled with an expression of quiet encouragement. How do I begin? I asked, my voice trembling with uncertainty. You begin by facing yourself, Yosef, he replied. You must confront the truth, not just about the world, but about who you are. Your past does not define you, but your future will be shaped by the choices you make from this moment onward. The weight of his words settled heavily upon me. I had spent so many years hiding from the truth, running from the pain of my past, but now Jesus was calling me to something greater, to live a life of authenticity, of honesty, and of love. The journey ahead was not going to be easy, but it was one I had to take. I could no longer live in the shadows of my own guilt. I had to step into the light, no matter how painful that might be. Will I ever be able to forgive myself? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The thought of facing the people I had hurt, the relationships I had damaged, it seemed impossible. How could I ever make up for the years I had lost, for the people I had neglected? Jesus' eyes softened with understanding. Forgiveness is not a destination, Yosef. It is a process. You must forgive yourself, but you also must allow others the space to forgive you. It will not happen all at once, but as you walk this path, you will find the grace you seek. The words felt like a balm to my soul, soothing the raw edges of my regret. Forgiveness of myself and others was not something that would happen in an instant. It was a process, a journey that would take time. But the seed of hope had been planted, and with it, the desire to change. And so, with Jesus' words echoing in my heart, I began to take the first steps toward healing. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and doubts. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. A peace that came not from escaping the truth, but from embracing it. I knew there would be moments of fear, of resistance. The scars of my past would not fade overnight, and the temptation to return to my old ways would always be there. But I also knew that the choice to change was mine, and that with each step, I could become the man I was always meant to be. As I walked away from that place, from that encounter with Jesus, I felt something shift within me, a quiet but undeniable transformation. The journey was just beginning, but I no longer felt alone. The love and the grace I had experienced were now a part of me, and I knew that no matter what came next, I had the strength to face it. The air was cold against my skin as I slowly opened my eyes. The pain that had consumed me moments ago was gone, replaced by a quiet sense of stillness. The chaos of the near-death experience had faded into a distant memory, and I found myself lying on the ground, surrounded by nothing but the sounds of the world awakening around me. I was back. I had returned to my body, to the life I once knew, but everything felt different now. The world had not changed. It was still the same city, the same streets, the same people, but I was no longer the same. I felt like a different person, as though I had been reborn in a way that was beyond my understanding. The encounter with Jesus, the visions, the emotions, they had altered something deep within me, something that I could not yet fully explain. As I stood up and looked around, I noticed the familiar things. The trees swaying in the wind, the distant hum of traffic, the faces of people passing by. But now it all seemed so distant. I had seen a higher reality, a truth that was more profound than anything I had ever known. The material world, with all its distractions and superficialities, no longer held the same weight. My mind was flooded with thoughts, questions, and doubts. How could I return to my old life? How could I continue to lead my congregation, to teach, to live among these people when I knew the depths of my own sin? How could I ever reconcile what I had seen with the life I had led before? The guilt was overwhelming. The weight of my past mistakes, the lies, the betrayals, the selfishness, felt like an anchor tied around my soul. I had been shown the consequences of my choices, and they were not pretty. I had hurt people, ignored the suffering of those around me, and chased after worldly success at the expense of my spiritual well-being. I had built my identity on things that would ultimately fade away. But in the midst of the guilt, I also felt something else. A quiet, steady peace. It was the peace that came from knowing I had been forgiven, from understanding that I had been given a chance to start anew. Jesus had not condemned me for my mistakes. He had shown me the way to redemption. He had offered me the chance to change, to make amends, to live a life of purpose and love. The challenge now was not just to accept that grace, but to live in it, to embody it in every aspect of my life. It was not going to be easy. The road ahead would be filled with challenges. I would face judgment from others, questions about my transformation, and moments of deep doubt. But I knew that I had to move forward, not for the approval of others, but for my own healing and growth. The first step was forgiving myself. I had carried the burden of my mistakes for so long, believing that I was unworthy of love, unworthy of redemption. But now I saw that Jesus had never seen me that way. He had shown me the potential for change within me, the possibility of healing. If he could forgive me, then surely I could begin to forgive myself. But the forgiveness didn't stop there. I also had to face the people I had hurt, the friends I had betrayed, the family members I had neglected, the community I had failed. I would have to confront the broken relationships and begin the long process of healing them. It was terrifying to think about. What if they didn't believe I had changed? What if they rejected me? But Jesus had shown me that redemption was not about perfection. It was about humility, repentance, and the willingness to change. I had to live out that truth no matter how difficult it might be. As I began to re-enter the world, I found that the process of reintegration was not as simple as I had hoped. There were moments of doubt, moments of fear, and moments when I questioned whether I had truly changed or if I was simply fooling myself. The old temptations, pride, greed, anger, still lurked in the shadows, trying to pull me back into my old ways. But with each day, I felt the transformation deepening. I began to take small steps toward healing, offering apologies, seeking reconciliation, and opening myself up to the love and grace of others. The people around me, some of whom had been hurt by my actions, began to see a change in me. Slowly, trust was rebuilt, and I found that the love I had once longed for, both from God and from those around me, was beginning to flow freely again. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect. There were still struggles, still moments of fear and doubt. But the peace that I had experienced in that encounter with Jesus was still with me, guiding me, strengthening me. I knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but I also knew that I was not walking it alone. Jesus had shown me the way, and now it was up to me to walk it with faith and courage. The journey of healing and redemption was just beginning, but I felt a deep sense of peace in knowing that I had made the choice to change. I was no longer the man I had been before. I was still a work in progress, but I was on the right path. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly alive, not just in the physical sense, but in the spiritual sense as well. I had been given a second chance, a new beginning, and I was determined to make the most of it. And so as I continue to walk this path, I carry with me the lessons of that near-death experience, the lessons of love, forgiveness, humility, and the power of redemption. I may never fully understand the depth of what I experienced, but I know this: I am not the same man I was before, and with each step I take, I am becoming more of the person God always intended me to be.